Welcome to the Future of Sharing, the series where we're looking hard at how can we make the sharing economy work for everyone. I'm Pete Leiden. I'm the founder of Reinvent, and I'm here in Philadelphia at the Democratic National Convention in the middle of July, a sweltering heat wave, just so you know, and we're also inside a convention space where we're surrounded by folks all around us making the most of their few days in Philly here. But for us, we're making the most of a little conversation here with Francesco Rutelli, who is the former mayor of Rome, put a good period of time in that, and then he also served as Italy's Minister of Culture and Tourism, if I understand right. So, welcome to the interview.
My great pleasure meeting you.
For those who don't really know much about your career, put it in context. When were you mayor of Rome? And also, how did that work with your time as Italy's Minister of Culture and Tourism?
Yeah, I had a very tough experience because Rome is the most wonderful city in the world, but also very complicated. I think we did a good job, and for us also integrating tourism and culture, that is the real infrastructure of our city, an ancient one, but a contemporary one, was very important. So you see, it's very interesting to have the Roman Forum, the Colosseum, St. Peter's, and at the same time building the new City of Music and the new auditorium of the city that is the most modern venue for culture, music in Italy that has been done. So we made many things, and I was also, because Reinvent is a very good title, very good name. I invented what Airbnb reinvented. I'm joking, of course.
Well,
but
tell us about that.
But in '99, we were.
So you were mayor. Just to be clear, you were mayor from what?
I started in '94 until 2001. So
Okay.
at the end of my mandate, there was the Christian Jubilee of the year 2000, the change of millennium. And the Pope was John Paul II. I was representing the other side, but very cooperating with the, let's say, the Pope at the time, but representing everybody with every faith or non-faith. And but we had a huge problem how to welcome and assist what would have been 70 million people in the city. So we were very afraid during the whole year.
The whole year, so okay.
Yeah. So we were very worried of the risk of a cartel by the hotels. So my administration created a system that hopefully would help each and every visitor to be hosted in a private house, so that the cartel couldn't work. It was not necessary, and anyway, it was a big failure.
Oh.
Why is that?
Why is it?
Because we didn't have that. So end of 90s, the idea was frankly very smart. It was very simple. Each and every family could host a family coming from outside with a very simple self-declaration, giving them a breakfast and hygiene basics, let's say. Yeah. But nearly nobody used that because there was not sharing economy, there was not interconnection. So it was an anticipation of what Airbnb many years later created and really made a great success.
That's success. But was it, even though it wasn't a great success, were you trying to do it through the internet, the internet of the 90s? Or was it all the phones, or how did you do it?
It was very poor, as you remember, because the internet in Italy in 1999 was very, very poor. And what was needed was a mass organization. But it worked also because we had many offer to host people from all over the world. So it was an initiative like another one we created at that time, what we called in Italy banca del tempo. I don't know how to translate it, maybe bank of time, meaning that it existed maybe in other cities in the world, meaning that you have 2 hours time and you give, you're a teacher, you're a gym teacher, you're a Latin teacher, you can help people visiting museum, you can support people with handicaps, with social problems and so on. You freely give your time to the community. It worked very well, and so we had many initiatives, but by them, allow me to say, when I was the mayor, it was another geological era. Speaking about technology,
yeah.
It is like, you know, of course, that today we are in Holocene, a geological era, but everybody of ours know that we are in the Anthropocene, meaning that the humankind is able to modify and also disrupt our environment, our global climate. I think we were in another era without the today's internet.
So it's great to know as a background. And then just to give people a sense, you then served as the Minister of Culture and Tourism a little bit later. Talk about that period of time and what your role was in that context.
You see, Italy is a country with 60 million people, about the population of Airbnb hosts, guests in the world by now. That shows how interesting is the job they are doing. And Italy, I guess, as a big problem. The problem is that we got an incredible variety, diversity of beauty, history, landscapes, and of course cities that are the best of my country. Cities, small towns, big cities, historical cities are really the best of Italy. And what we lacked, and we still lack in my country, is perceiving tourism as an industry. So what I think is that today maybe the new platform and mainly Airbnb, give an answer to an unsolved question: how to have tourists not like robots, how to have a personal experience, how to have a communication, a dialogue, an encounter between hosts and guests, something that today is very important. Let me say, in times when people is scary, is afraid for violence, for difficulties. If you let people enter in your house, in your home, I think it's very important in building a different approach for a community that is, of course, an international community and a culture sharing. So for Italy, all that is very important because we are not just, allow me to say, like France. France is perceived like tout Paris. Everything is in Paris. It's not true, because France is a beautiful country with many destinations and history and diversity. But of course, the great centralization in Paris, like in London, of course, in the UK. In Italy, you don't have that. Of course, you get Rome, you get Florence, you get Venice, but you get hundreds of destinations that are tiny cities, that are wonderful places, that are countryside, seaside, mountains, that are absolutely unique in the world. So a sharing approach for the tourism in our country is also very positive for the economy, and I think it is also a great issue in your country, because you have a middle class who can earn something to make ends meet, to live better, and also, I repeat, creating such an approach of mutual understanding with people you have in your house, in your personal experience. Still, another important thing I see is that a personal experience today is very important, because we're going to have a mass organization of tourism that is mainly cruising system. Everything is positive. I do not blame anything.
When you say cruising, you mean?
I mean that you pack 5,000 people on
a boat,
on a big ship, on a big boat, and then it's very tight. And by now it's tight because you have security issues, you have security problems everywhere. You've seen in the Mediterranean Sea, also in Tunisia, people who sadly were killed in the Bardo Museum, a wonderful museum in Tunis, that is also a Roman museum with fantastic mosaics and historical landmarks, but were disembarked from a cruise, peacefully shipping in the Mediterranean Sea, then arriving to a museum. So we got a complex issue for tourism in our region, in Mediterranean region and Europe. People want to travel safely. People fears the new threats, terrorism, of course, lone wolves, what you see every day in these very days in Germany, for instance, or in France, that are damaging so much the tourism, mainly in the southern border of the Mediterranean Sea, because these wonderful countries like Tunisia, as I said, Egypt, Turkey also, today are deeply damaged by this threat. So the international traveler, à mon avis, according to my opinion, has two choices. He got many choices, but he can make a personal experience, or it can be part of a mass organization. I think this experience can be a much more a personal experience, something that could also benefit very much my country.
So, before, back in that the 90s or the other era, and even the 2000s, how were those small little towns in Italy? How did people interact with them, or did they have opportunities to stay there, or is this opening up new spaces in this new sharing economy, or is it something replacing the old infrastructure at some level?
No, I think it's a completely changing panorama. It's a completely changing view, because you see, maybe you heard about what also in the U.S. is called Chianti Shire, meaning that in Tuscany, fantastic place where high-end mainly travelers, tourists, and lovers of Italy bought a home. So Chianti is the region for the fantastic wines, and it is called Chianti Shire, meaning that not Chianti share, sharing, because it means that so many people from the US, from UK, from France, Germany, Nordic countries bought a house. But not everybody can do that.
Totally, yeah.
So the idea of presenting to mainly young people, but not only young people, ordinary families, the opportunities in this incredible variety of Italian diversity of Italian cities. I'm sure nobody really knows how fantastic and rich is our heritage, our museums, our experiences, of course, our food, our human relation experiences today. It's not new, because there was an outstanding experience that was named the Grand Tour.
Yeah.
The Grand Tour started in end of 16th century and brought to Italy mainly, not only, but mainly to Italy, the, let's say, the ruling class, the bourgeoisie from all over Europe. And it was not, as anybody imagines maybe, not only an opportunity to learn history, art, architecture, and the great collections of great Italian families. It was also a living experience, meaning that people who was traveling in 16, 17, 18 until the beginning of 19th century used to come also for sex. For sex experiences. You don't read so much. You read it on memories some travelers made, but they came to Italy for food, for a direct experience with our people who are very open, very welcoming, let's say, but also for sentimental reasons. You had so many experiences in this Grand Tour. Of course, today the Grand Tour happens much more on the internet. You don't need to travel a couple of thousand miles to have a dating.
But what's interesting, this Grand Tour thing is a very interesting thing, is what they didn't just go to the equivalent of some giant hotel when they were doing that. They were integrating in with the local families, I'm assuming, back in those periods. Is that right? How that Grand Tour? So they'd spend many months, right, and weeks in one locality with kind of local folks who they could connect to.
No, it was in the Grand Tour. You
mean. Grand Tour.
It was really a tour, and what you see is in the great painters and writers of the era, from Goethe, the German writer, from Poussin, the great French painter, and so on. But they had some steps. They went to Naples. They went to also much more south to Palermo and Sicily. That is my family's origin, hometown, a couple of centuries ago. And of course to Florence. But it was a traveling experience that really shaped the modern culture. And please do not forget that if we use the word tourism, it's for that. It starts from the Grand Tour.
All right. Oh yeah, exactly.
Tourism is born there, and many things. I'm born in my country. I don't know, Valentine Day, 14th of February. It's due to the bishop, to a saint in Terni, central Italy. We really don't know why he was the protector of lovers.
But we'll take that. We'll take
it. It's still there. Christmas. You understand that the first Christmas event was made in Rome beginning at the 4th century with the Emperor Costantino. I can continue telling you that so many routes we have in the past should be, for instance, the carnival. The carnival is an extraordinary experience coming out from Venice, from so many cities, because you have to give people also in modern times what the ancient Romans called panem et circenses. Bread and circus.
We're doing that. We're doing that here in our politics in the United States. No, well, so that's interesting. So the roots, you could even say, of a weird kind of sharing economy tourism, actually, it could be attributed to some of the patterns started in Italy. So let's move back to the modern sharing economy. When you were the culture minister, or the minister of tourism, is kind of the birth of what we think of as the more digital sharing economy. Airbnb, for example, started in 2008, but other kind of sharing economy companies, Uber and others, kind of born around that time. So when you have been watching this in its modern manifestation, are you largely you feel it's a positive development? Do you feel there's some issues there? I mean, talk a little bit about what you see this modern manifestation. Maybe start with some positives. What do you like about it?
I completely approved and I support it because first of all, it's more competition that is useful. Second,
competition with the existing
competition because
hotels.
You don't have
taxis.
just a few big companies. You can multiply the offer. You can pick up your choice. You as a consumer, as a traveler. Second, again, for my country, that would have been much better because we have to promote our diversity. While we were talking, I already spoke about a dozen of cities, not only my own city of Rome, but dozen of cities. You see, there is a concept that, according to my experience, is very important. A city has to change. A city is like a language. If you don't have a transformation, it dies. There is a real similitude between a language who dies if it doesn't change, and a city that can die if it doesn't change continuously. So also these sort of experiences that frankly at my time as being Minister of Culture were very, very at their very first step, so not so relevant, but trying today to understand the change and trying to support that opportunity, I think is very important for the real economy, for what we call middle class, for a sustainable tourism. Of course, you have to be accountable and you have to be sustainable in your practices as a company.
So when you say sustainable, so you talk a little bit about how it helps the middle class and various things, but talk about that sustainable piece a little bit. Is that an important element of this that you like?
I think it's very important because look, we're going to have only from China. Today the forecast says about around 900 million people will be tourists. Of course, it's going to start in Eastern Asia. It's going to start, of course, in China itself, but in Eastern Asia. But of course, now it's going everywhere. So when I take the same example for climate change, when that is not so appropriate, pardon me, but just to help you understand something from my point of view. When we had a world of 1 billion people from OECD countries with a developed economy, the issue of global pollution and climate change was something. When, of course, a global population of 7.2 heading towards 9 billion people has the complete right to have the same we got in terms of energy, in terms of services, in terms of access to mobility and connection, etc. Of course, you need a leapfrog. You need a real deep technological breakthrough to avoid that also the growing population in the developing and emerging countries repeats our development model that can be afforded by a planet that has the well-known limits his structure. So the same is for mass tourism at very different level, because when you shift from the grand tour made by the European elite,
exactly.
you shift to the motorization, I don't know how to say it, the motorization generation that was brought by the until the first part of 19th century. You could reach my city, you could reach Rome, that was in ancient times the city capital of the world. You could do that only by walking. Then second half of 19th century you had railways, slowly. Then you have private motorization. But today, mass tourism, cruise,
and of course, planes.
Of course, the mass, the big growth. So you see, I know very well quite well the Gulf area, and if you imagine that the Dubai airport was, I think, about the 70th place as as an airport at the world level, international level. Today is maybe the first or the second. That gives you a very clear idea of where the mass tourism is heading to. So we need sustainability, because we need a new approach in mass tourism will not destroy our cities.
Right.
You see that is happening with a big risk. For instance, in Venice, you have a great debate in my country about the fact that you should ban big ships from the Venice lagoon. It's a great debate. Also, UNESCO raised the question: how could we protect Venice as a UNESCO preferred site from this incredible. Venice is an island. It's an island where 40,000 people live, but where 40 million people want to go. And they will go there. They have the right to go there. So how to arrange that? Not only in terms of building big hotels and mass facilities, but also maintaining a personal experience.
Yeah.
That's a great issue for our cities that has, of course, have to change in terms of what I was saying. A city that doesn't change dies, as an old language, but also to reinvent their identity through sustainability. Technology can help, but sharing economy and sharing services can help even more.
Totally love that. Now you've been talking a lot about the home sharing, but car sharing in the same way. It's like you need more people using cars, less car spaces in the cities. I mean, it's all kind of the same idea from your point of view?
See, I think it's very interesting because, first of all, I think there is a debate if the future, but you know so much more than me, on that if we're going to have a more carless drivers or driverless cars in the future. Right. But just to give you an example, the city of Paris got a total amount of 500,000 parking lots, but 350,000 of them are inside condos, inside the building housing complex. So you should use, they're empty during the day because people get out to work, and they could be filled by people searching for if you have a good system in arranging that. That's just an example. In Rome it's much more difficult, you know, because we are an ancient city, we have archaeological remnants everywhere, every transformation is so complicated. But you can do that.
This is terrific. So you're now, if a lot of cities are starting to grapple with this for the first time, this whole sharing economy. If you had to give advice to fellow mayors, people running cities, any thoughts on how you'd approach this if you were approaching, thinking about the regulations, thinking about how to make it, is it good, is it bad? Just give your advice. If you have the open mic here to tell folks about what you would advise.
You see, I think first of all, every city has a different problem. Mm-hmm. And of course also different solutions, but I think we should approach towards shared regulation basics. I mean that some principles. I consider quite encouraging what is happening in Europe, where the European Commission decided not to encourage an over-regulation, a red tape system about the sharing economy. They said it's an opportunity. Of course, we have to regulate, but not to over-regulate. So I think we need a framework of measures that can be shared by governments, institutions, national, state, regional, or local. Not so many, very simple. Of course, we have to help people being compliant with taxation, that is necessary, of course. An appropriate taxation should be also helpful in order to protect from mass tourism. That could be a very good approach to support this outstanding change in our daily experience, traveling experience. And I think that you should have also a diversification in terms of local approaches, because Venice is different from Philadelphia. You couldn't have the same approach in Florence and in San Diego, and I think you can share maybe this point of view. A simple regulation, framework regulation, and local decision in order to help avoiding unsustainable paths and supporting this very, very promising industry, this very, very promising experience for ordinary people.
And where do you think we are in that process, what you're advising here? Do you feel that there are some principles that are emerging, or do you feel we're at the stage here that we still have to figure out those simple prevailing principles, or do you feel it's clear?
I think it's interesting because it's very different, because in some cities, like here in Philadelphia, the mayor was very, very able, very, very smart in explaining his community that it was a good opportunity. In other cities, some mayors try to show that the problems that are real problems sometimes, meaning for locals, not everybody benefiting from that, of course, are more a danger than an opportunity. So I think that explaining, hearing what are, because I think to listen. It is much better than only to speak sometimes. So when you listen, you come from San Francisco. In San Francisco area, you got so many places named by Italian saints. I guess.
True enough.
From San Francisco, my name.
Exactly. There we go.
And
starting at the top.
But I guess you do not know where does Cupertino come from. Cupertino name, the very city capital of Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
It is a not so well-renowned Italian saint from Apulia, from Copertino, a small city in Salento, San Giuseppe da Copertino, San Joseph from Copertino. An explorer gave that name to a creek in a desert area in California in the 18th century. And from there, Cupertino became Cupertino, and Silicon Valley's capital comes from a tiny Italian. But I was
The
saying,
home of Apple Computer, just for
yes,
those that don't know. Exactly.
Each and every Apple computer.
We owe it.
owe
That's
something to San Giuseppe da Cupertino, who was a saint who used to fly.
So there we go.
His strength was that he was a flying saint. But I was saying that because there is another Italian saint who gave his name to an important California area, San Bernardino,
Oh, yeah.
who used to say, "Our God gave us just one mouth and 2 ears, because you have more to listen than to speak."
I like that. And so,
I think
we're
every mayor should listen, then speak.
And so that is a perfect place to end this interview, which has been terrific in terms of opening up kind of our thinking about the sharing economy, a much more global perspective, as well as a much more long-range and historical perspective. And thank you so much for bringing both those big picture perspectives to this conversation.
Thank you very much.